got a special friend, and she's the oldest lady that's out here. And I want y'all to go meet her. She's got a real good story to tell. That's Miss Agnes Fee right back there.
Name is Agnes Nesbitt Fee. And my daddy was Colonel William Nesbitt. And as you can tell, he fought in the War of the Revolution. Now, he was very modest, and he didn't tell me a lot of the stories, but my neighbor, Mr. Hood, was very proud that my papa fought with him and with Colonel Sumter, General Sumter. At Broad River, my papa saved Mr. Hood's life. He carried him across Broad River at great risk to his own life. And so he rescued my neighbor, and Mr. Hood was very good about telling me that. Every time he saw me, he was just so proud that Papa was there. And my Papa also fought with General Sumter at Hanging Rock. Now, at Hanging Rock, it was a fierce battle. It was just awful. And things were going so poorly. It was dragging out for so long. And General Sumter pointed to a British soldier, a British general, and said, William, if you kill him, this battle will be over. And so that is exactly what Papa did. He did what he had to do. And amongst gunfire, he walked up and got as close as he could, and he shot that general, and that redcoat. And he killed him, and that battle ended very shortly after that. Now, he was not proud of that, but he did what he had to do. But he was a hero in our eyes. Now, but it wasn't just my papa that was a hero. We have some wonderful people in our family, and a lot of them come from my husband's family, the Fee side. Now, my husband's great-grandfather, 5 generations back, lived in Scotland. And things got really bad over there. They were persecuting the Presbyterians, something fierce. And they were just being hideous to them. And so they left, the Fees left from Scotland and settled in Ireland, somewhere near Belfast. And so when they settled in there, and my husband's great-great-grandfather was born. Now, he was an earl. His name was Robert, and he was an earl. And his daughter, Lady Elizabeth, looked outside one day because there was quite a commotion. Banners were waving, bagpipes were playing, drums were beating, and there in the midst of it all stood a gorgeous man. He was 6'8", in his red coat, in his blue bonnet. He was well proportioned, the most handsome man she had ever seen. So she sent an invitation to him to make her acquaintance. Now, this would not have been proper for just anybody, but she was a lady, so it was allowed. And he came, and he was very glad to be able to meet her, and he fell in love immediately. When he saw her, it was definite love at first sight. And what he said was, well, she said he was the bonniest lad that ever wore plaid. What he said was that she was the brightest sun that he had ever seen. So they immediately fell in love and wanted to get married, but her daddy was not pleased because she was going to be married beneath her rank. And so he disinherited her, but he did give them a little farm in the same county. And so they did marry, and they had several children, 5, I believe it was. And so my husband's grandfather was one of those children. Now, when he got married, when Robert's grandfather got married, his wife's mother was not real happy about it because Robert was not in the church at that time. He was not a member, and so she just didn't want anything to do with that. But they were in love, and so they did get married, and eventually her mama made peace with it. And when they came to America, she came with them. Now, it was a 13-week journey, and it was a rough journey on those seas, too. They landed in Charleston, North Carolina, on Christmas Day. They didn't stay in North Carolina very long, though. They moved where other Presbyterians were, other Scottish, Irish Presbyterians in South Carolina. And they made their home there. That's where we met. That's where Robert and I met. And so we got married in my mom and daddy's house in Lancaster County. And then we settled in a farm next door to his daddy in Chester County. Well, Robert was a fine man. He was just a fine man, a wonderful Christian, and he took our children. He took me and my children, all nine of them, to church every Sunday. It was 8 miles away, but we filled up the pew every Sunday. Now, my husband passed away, but before he did, his daddy moved. He decided to come west. Now, he did not want anything to do with slavery. He just thought it was an abomination to buy and sell human flesh. And he knew that there was trouble coming, so he decided to move west. And there were 40 of them at the time. Robert's daddy and brothers and their families. And they came over the Cumberland Pass, and not long after that, they had to make a decision about where they were going, and they weren't sure yet whether they were going to go to Arkansas or Indiana or Illinois. And so it came to a fork in the road, and they had to make a decision. Well, they decided to use horse sense. They dropped the reins of the horse, the lead horse, one of Robert's brothers was in it, and let the horse decide which fork in the road to take. It took them to Bloomington, Indiana. And that's where a lot of his brothers are settled. There's a lot of fees there to this day. But a few years, it cost them $29 for all 40 of them to make that journey to Indiana. Now, a few years later, there we were by ourselves, and a couple of my kids had grown up, and we wanted to come west also. Now, my daughter, Agnes Lavinia we called her, she had already moved to Rough and Ready. And so William, my son, brought me and my daughter Sarah, who was a widow woman at that time with 3 children of her own. He brought us to Rough and Ready, and that's where we settled. And it was a wonderful place for most part. And now we did have a few riffraff that caused trouble, but now my son-in-law, Lavinia's husband, was Benjamin Hyatt, and he was an upstanding young man. He preached at one time in his later years, but he took care of my daughter very well. And they started out with just a few acres here on the hill, about 40 acres, and then they moved north of town on 400 acres. Well, and then let me think. Oh, William, my daughter Sarah didn't last very long here. Bless her heart, she passed away. And William raised her kids, raised her daughter Sarah, and so that's how we wound up here on Rough and Ready Hill. Now, I need to. Several of my grandsons were killed in the war between the states. It was a horrible thing, but I'm not going to talk much about that. I want you to go meet David DeArmond, and he will tell you some about the war between the states.
My name is David DeArmond, and I was born in 1842. It doesn't say that on the tombstone here. In East Feliciana Parish, Louisiana. We moved to Drew County, and when the Civil War broke out, I was 18 years old. Well, my mom and daddy made me promise I wouldn't join the Army till I was 20. So I didn't go in the Army right away when the war started. It was a couple of years before I joined, and I was stationed here on Rough and Ready Hill in the 26th Arkansas Infantry Regiment. Now, the significance of that is there was a Union unit in Little Rock under General Steele, and there was a cavalry unit in Pine Bluff under Colonel Powell, Clayton Powell. And we were the only unit stationed in southeast Arkansas. So if it hadn't been for us, Steele and Powell Clayton could have taken southeast Arkansas anytime they wanted to. So we were sort of guarding this part of the state, and we stayed here mostly on Rough and Ready Hill. The only major engagement we were involved in was one over between Warren and Fordyce at New Edinburgh. Do you know where New Edinburgh is? Well, that was called the Battle of Mark's Mill. And so they pulled us out of here, and we did go over to Mark's Mill for that big battle. But mostly we were stationed here on Rough and Ready Hill throughout the remainder of the Civil War. Now, the last major battle in the state of Arkansas during the Civil War was here. It was called the Battle of Rough and Ready. And it was on May the 24th, 1865. Now, the significance of that is, if you'll recall, General Lee surrendered on April 9th, 1865. And this battle was on May 24th. So the Civil War had been over a month before they fought the battle here. And it gets kind of murky at that point. Nobody seems to recall if it was, they just hadn't heard that the war was over, or they were very upset about losing. And then the final version of that was that it was a family feud in which one family persuaded the Union forces to kick in with them, and the other family persuaded the Confederates to kick in with them. So nobody, I don't think anybody really knows, but you'll recall, most of you, or some of you that are from around here maybe, there's a cemetery about 2 miles south of here called Union Ridge. Now the reason that's called Union Ridge is because the artillery, the Union artillery, was lined up along that hill out there. And they had a big battle, a big fracas. They were shooting their cannons and they were shooting their muskets and they were shouting, and it just made a whole lot of noise and nobody was injured. So the battle came out okay. And there were a couple of battles, I think, in Texas after that, but that was the last one in Arkansas. So after the war was over, I had some land down near the community of New Hope. And so I moved down there and I farmed for the rest of my life until 1889 when I died. And again, folks of you that are from around here know there's a whole lots of DeArmonds around. It's a large family. Most of them live south of here. A lot of them buried down in this Union Ridge Cemetery I was talking about, and in New Hope and Valley and communities further south from here primarily, and Lone Sassafras is another cemetery. But I wanted to be buried here because this is where I was during the war, and it had a sentimental attachment for me. Now,